Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill. Massive matchup Friday night. Illinois heading on the road to play Nebraska. The environment, it's going to be special Friday night in Lincoln. Want to get into Dill 4 reasons we see Nebraska winning this football game against Illinois. And, quite frankly, this doesn't have anything to do with taking shots at Illinois. Like, this is a very good football program that's had some impressive wins to start 2024. But you look at the matchup and say, there are a few key things that I think Nebraska can do to have some success, especially at home Friday night in Lincoln, Nebraska. Fired up to get into this one. Now, before we do, and as always, most importantly, let it fly in the comment section, right? Whether you're a Nebraska fan, whether you're an Illinois fan, disagreeing with the boys' takes, like, this is the beauty of doing this. So appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, I think it starts with Nebraska's ability to win with 4 in the pass rush. Now, you go back to the conversations we had with Nebraska during this offseason. It felt like in 2023, as good as this Nebraska defense was in 2023, one of the things we wanted to see them kind of take that stride in is being able to manufacture a strong pass rush with not having to scheme up blitzes. Why did Nebraska have so much success against Colorado 2 weeks ago? I think it largely had to do with, hey, Nebraska didn't have to send more than 4 guys to really get after Shadur Sanders. You look at Luke Altmaier, who has, a really strong start to his 2024 year, but you go back to 2023 when he's under pressure, 38% completion percentage, 5 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He's pretty good when he's blitzed, but when he's not blitzed and pressure is brought on him, that's when he starts to struggle. That's when he starts forcing the football. Dill, if Nebraska can do what they did 2 weeks ago against Colorado in terms of just getting after the passer with 4 and dropping the rest in coverage, it's hard to see Nebraska not having a lot of success on the defensive side of the football.
And that's where the emergence of guys like Prince Will, MJ Sherman, I think really can bear some teeth, if you will, for this Nebraska team. Because obviously last year, Ty Robinson especially, he could always generate a lot of pressure. He's been doing it again this year. I like his matchup. I think he can get after that center for Illinois a little bit. But I think when you're trying to expand that out and be able to consistently get it and get it through other ways, I kind of look at guys like Prince Will and MJ as guys who I think can be secondary pressure guys, be guys who can be creating a lot of havoc and be disruptive for Luke Altmaier.
The thing is, I don't even know if they're secondary guys. If throughout the first 3 games, who's the best pass rusher on this Nebraska team? Yeah, Ty Robinson, even Nash. I think Nash losing the weight. He's been better as a pass rusher as well. They're allowed to do a lot more games in terms of stunts and different looks to give offensive linemen. You go back to that Colorado game, stunts coming from different spots. I think more importantly, the presence of these edge rushers that just, you didn't really have it in 2023. Who was your go-to edge rusher for Nebraska in 2023? They weren't bad, but they certainly weren't great. They were kind of relying on either sending linebackers or Ty Nash on the inside. You look at Principal U, 25% pass rush win rate throughout the first 3 games, elite number. James Williams, a guy that you should have shouted out. I think James Williams, as a pure pass rusher, has been an absolute dude. And then MJ Sherman, he certainly has taken that step as well. So I look at this matchup and say, Illinois has been solid on the offensive line and pass protection, but I don't think they've seen a defensive front like Nebraska. I think this is a Nebraska defensive line. We talked the same way about Colorado. Hey, Colorado's offensive line looked pretty dang good against North Dakota State. Well, they didn't look very good against Nebraska. I think Nebraska is going to do that to a lot of different teams throughout the 2024 year. If they can get pressure with 4 on Luke Altmaier, that's when he struggles. Biggest key to the game for Nebraska. Number 2, and something that we feel pretty confident in, you look at this Illinois passing attack, it's been pretty damn good, right? Luke Altmaier having a good start, but you look at the difference makers on the outside, it's pretty one-dimensional with 2 players, and Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin, the transfer from, Ole Miss and UTSA. Dill, here's a kind of a wild stat. So there's been 56 catches for this Illinois team throughout the first 3 games of the season. Over half, 31 of them, have gone to either Franklin or Pat Bryant. And I think what's kind of special and helps Nebraska out is, all right, so it becomes obvious. We got to try to take away Pat Bryant and Zachary. I keep wanting to call him Zachariah. Zachary Franklin. We got to take away those 2 wide receivers. Now, what helps Nebraska and Tony White here they only line up on the boundary. You take a look at their snap distribution, both are 80% plus taking their snaps on the boundary as boundary wide receivers. So they don't necessarily move these Illinois wide receivers around all that much. And then you look at Tommy Hill, a guy that I think deserves to be in the conversation with guys like Will Johnson and Denzel Burke, having that elite boundary cornerback for Nebraska going up against really where Illinois is going to try to hurt you. I think that's a massive, massive advantage for this Nebraska team.
Yeah, and when you can take away one boundary, I think it goes a long way. I mean, we talk about it with Will Johnson. I don't think Michigan was necessarily elite on the other side of him last year, but because he was so good and how much he could kind of shoulder the load of one side of the field on his own, it allowed them to really shore up the other side, and they were really consistent no matter who it was, whether it was Washington, Ohio State, whoever they went up against, they were always really tough. And I think a lot of it had to do with that number one alpha dog corner. I think Tommy Hill, you're really starting to see him become that guy. I mean, Colorado's wide receivers really didn't do a whole lot against him. He was obviously really dominant in that football game. I think another thing for Nebraska's secondary is their ability to vary the coverage a little bit, because I thought there were some moments where Luke Altmaier, when you go man-to-man strictly on him, I think given how good those two boundary guys are, how good they are at catching the ball in traffic, it felt like they were able to expose some teams. But even Central Michigan, I felt like through the first half did a pretty good job of varying their coverage. And you saw Luke Altmaier hold the ball a little bit, feel a little bit less comfortable. So that'll be another thing I'm looking for is can they vary their coverage and kind of keep him on his toes and keep him uncomfortable? Because that has been one thing he's really struggled with in his career is dealing or like keeping his composure in certain areas. When he's playing in rhythm and getting the ball out on time, he's been really, really effective. But like you said, when there's pressure put on him and he doesn't necessarily have that guy to go get the ball to quickly, he starts making mistakes. He starts taking sacks. He'll fumble the ball. He'll do all sorts of things that you really
Yeah,
can't.
Luke Altmaier's he's the definition of a hot and cold quarterback. Like, there's a reason this kid was a 4-star coming out of high school. When he's on, when he's clicking, like we've seen him put up some 400 passing yard games and really start to cook. Though you talk about varying coverages, excuse me, making quarterbacks uncomfortable. Ain't many better guys in the country than Tony White, specifically with all that experience that they have coming back. We kind of noted this after the Colorado game. It's really paying dividends to return pretty much that whole secondary. Like, you can tell these guys are on the same page, whether it's man coverage, whether it's zone coverage, passing guys off. One of the Nebraska fans noted it when we were recapping the Colorado game. Just really good chemistry and communication back there. Like, how many times are there just blatantly big throwing windows against this Nebraska secondary? Not often. It's because a lot of these guys have played a lot of football together, and you go into year two with this Tony White defense, it is clear as day that this secondary is much more comfortable with what they're doing in Tony White's defense. And I think Tony White has a massive, massive variety of different looks and coverages that he's comfortable throwing at a guy like Luke Altmaier. They'll going to the offensive side of the football. I think this might be the biggest advantage for Nebraska, and that's running between the tackles. Where's Nebraska had their most success running the football? Between the tackles, power, inside zone concepts. Where's Illinois struggling the most? It's between the tackles. Like, you can tell this is an Illinois team that misses dearly guys like Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph from last year. Last year, you couldn't really run the ball between the tackles because of the presence of a guy like Johnny Newton. This year, having to replace two legitimate NFL guys, you can tell that Illinois is struggling to replace those guys. Look, Nebraska, it's very clear what their offensive identity is. There's a reason Dante Dowdle is the lead running back for this Nebraska team, because he's a hammer. He's a vertical running back that wants to get downhill. That's what Kansas was able to do. Like, you go back to 2023, Kansas threw out a lot of kind of misdirection and had a lot of success against Illinois. You go to the film in 2024, hey, we're going to run the football between the tackles, kind of impose our will along the line of scrimmage.
And part of it, honestly, is just a bit of a lack of depth. I mean, I think Edwards is a good player. I think Briggs is a solid player. He's obviously not like a Randall or a Newton necessarily, but I think you saw Kansas wear them out a little bit. And you saw towards the end of the game, them moving the ball and moving guys off the line of scrimmage and getting like 5-6 yards just running between the tackles, which really isn't Kansas's bread and butter necessarily. They're obviously a team that likes to get at the perimeter. So I think that was one really disappointing thing I thought you saw from Illinois. And again, you kind of said it, Nebraska is a team that has very much shown their ability to commit to that run, not just do it and do it effectively, but do it all game and never really get bored of it. And I think that's for a lot of coaches, it's something they struggle with. Like, when it doesn't work, they start to want to throw the ball and see if they can get something explosive. Nebraska, I think, is very well built to wear teams down, break them, and just keep hitting, especially with the fact that they're a little bit deeper at running back than
Oh
they
yeah,
were last year.
100%, and they want to feed that. I mean, Dante Donald's one of those guys. You see the interview after that Colorado game where he's like, I could have made Shiloh Sanders miss, but I wanted to punish him. Like that's kind of Dante Dowdle, and he's one of those guys that you don't want to tackle 20 plus times a game. And I think Nebraska's going to make you tackle this kid 20 plus times a game Friday night. And Dill, secondly, why is it so important? Like, one, I think it's probably a weakness of this Illinois team. Again, they're giving up 5 yards per carry. That's 95th in the country. But more importantly, like, you look at how this Illinois team wants to operate on defense. They want to get you in 3rd and long. They want to take the football away. If you can avoid, and Dylan Rhule has done a phenomenal job not turning the football over, not even putting the ball in harm's way. That one turnover he has on his record in this season, questionable, I'll say the least. That being said,
he hasn't seen a tandem like the two Scotts. I mean, those two are ball hawks. They're really, really aggressive, and they'll make plays on it. So, again, I think you're right. They don't want to be in that situation, and that's frankly for 2 reasons. Not only is that where Illinois wants to live, but also I think you don't necessarily want to see these Nebraska tackles, specifically Turner Corcoran, who I don't think's totally been tested yet, have to deal with 2 really, really elite.
So that's where we disagree, I think. Like, I think you say what you want about Colorado. I think they have good edge rushers.
Yeah, but they couldn't stop the run. That's why I think the big issue. I don't think he had to just line up and have them pinning their ears back. So, again, that's where it gets really, really important to run the ball consistently. And hopefully Nebraska, for their sake, can have some of that success. Because I think if they do get into a bit of a shootout passing, that's where you can see Seth Coleman and Gabe Yakas really start to get rolling. And I don't know that I want to see Turner Corcoran have to go deal with those two very consistently when they know that passes are coming.
Yeah, and I look, I think Turner Corcoran has been a pleasant surprise for Nebraska throughout the first 3 weeks. I think he's been pretty. Well, me and you were both.
Well, because they're playing the game on their terms. They're playing in the way I think he wants to play it too.
Well, you can also give Turner Corcoran a little damn credit for being solid in pass protection throughout the year. That being said, I'm with you. That was our 4th key. Kind of read my mind here. Like, these edge rushers are really good. Like, Illinois wants to win on 1st and 2nd down, pin the ears back in after the passer, and force turnovers. Nebraska's been solid in pass protection. Dylan Rhule has been really, really good in terms of not putting the ball in harm's way, but you kind of said it best. If you can continue to play the game on your terms like they've had the first 3 games of the season, you're probably not playing into what Illinois wants to do on defense. For those reasons, you got Nebraska beating Illinois. I think it's going to be a good game. Like, I'm not like itching to bet Nebraska to cover over a touchdown because I do think this will be a dogfight. Illinois is, I wouldn't say like an elite team in the Big Ten, but they're damn solid. Like, there's not many holes in this Illinois team, but I think Nebraska's good. I think, Dill, one of the things we talked about before this season was how does Nebraska go from like good to great? And obviously it started with the quarterback spot. It started with not turning the football over, some of those superficial conversations. But the second part was, can they have some guys that decided to come back for one more year, emerge as legit NFL dudes? Like, that was kind of like, who are the great players for Nebraska? Like, we've seen that. Like Ty Robinson, guys like Tommy Hill, guys like Isaiah Nayor. Like, they're getting some guys that are stepping up in meaningful ways. And I think that matters for Nebraska. That's what gives them the edge. Then we'll close it out there. Yeah, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.